Hello everybody, today we're going to be doing De Primo Principio, Chapter 3, Conclusions 1 through 6 by Blessed John Duns Scotus. A quick note before we begin. First, all of the premises that Scotus talks about are in terms of possibility. He's talking about modalities, not about things that he's actually observing. So when he talks about things, he's going to talk about how they're possible, not about how they actually are. Next, you can restructure everything he says into a non-modal argument about things that actually exist. And then finally, I'll be leaving out certain arguments that I think he levels which don't work. I think all of his conclusions are sound, and I think he has good reasons for them, but some of the reasons are, well, I think objectively wrong, so I'll be leaving a couple of the justifications out and keeping in the ones which I appreciate and think are, functional. With that said, let's jump in. First, conclusion 1. Some nature among beings can produce an effect. That's just, it's possible for some thing to make another thing. Some nature can be produced. That's just possible. Nothing comes from itself. Nothing comes from nothing. Therefore, it must come from something else. And if it comes from something else, that something else must be capable of producing it. Conclusion 2, part 1. Something among natures is simply first, without an efficient cause, and capable of causing without the assistance of another. This just means there's something which is the first cause, or it's possible that there's something that's the first cause, and that this first cause, because it is before all of the other causes, doesn't cause in virtue of them. They don't make it cause things. It causes them. I'm sorry if that was a little confusing. But yeah, it causes, it doesn't use other things as causes. Other things don't, or I guess more accurately, other things don't use it as a cause. Yeah. And then the argument, some natures capable of producing an effect, conclusion 1, which is conclusion 1. This thing either causes in virtue of itself or in virtue of another. If it's in virtue of another, then there's either an infinite chain or a finite one. An infinite chain is possible, therefore it's either a finite one or it's the only member in the chain. And if it's either of those, then the truth of conclusion 2 is established. Now, this is the support for premise 4 in the last argument: an infinite chain is impossible. So first he notes 3 differences between Pedicé and Petachiden's ordered series. The first is that in an essentially ordered series, all of the instrumental, i.e. non-primary or secondary members, depend on the primary member for their causal power. Now, this isn't assuming that there is a first member in the series. This isn't assuming that the series is finite. What this is assuming is that all of the secondary members which don't have causal power in virtue of themselves have it in virtue of another, which is true of Pedicé ordered series. So I want to be clear, this isn't begging the question, though there is a version of this, there's a reading of this where it does beg the question, but that's an incorrect reading. Second, all priors, or all things that come before, are more perfect than their posteriors in a Pedicé ordered series. This is the order of eminence, which we talked about in the first video. And then C, Pedicé causes are simultaneous. They happen at the same time. This is not a series that extends backwards in time. And then we have the second thing. An infinity of Pedicé ordered causes is impossible. And his argument for this, at least the one that I think works, there are 2 or 3 others, but I don't think they're functional. The conjunction of all secondary causes in a Pedicé series are simultaneously caused. The only thing outside the conjunction of secondary causes that can do the causing is a primary cause. So take a second to think about this. The conjunction, that means if you have a sentence that says the last cause and the second to last cause and the third to last cause, and you add all of them up, even if there's an infinite number of them, even if there's an infinite number of members in this series, the conjunction of all of them, A plus B plus C plus D plus E, all of them are secondary. So there's going to need to be something outside of the conjunction which causes all of the secondary things to enact their causal power. This is a style of argument which Josh Rasmussen and Robert C. Coons are fond of, and I think it's a very good line to take. Next, we have conclusion 3. If what is able to cause effectively is simply first, then it is incapable of being caused. That's just because it can't be produced. Nothing affects it. Nothing can. It's first. Nothing comes before it. Conclusion 4. A being able to exercise efficient causality, which is simply first, actually exists, and some nature actually existing is capable of exercising such causality. If it exists, it's self-existent, and since nothing external to it can affect it because it is uncausable, then if it is possible that it exists, it has to exist. It is possible that it exists. That was conclusion 2 from earlier. And then the conclusion here, therefore it exists. Conclusion 5. An uncausable being is necessarily existent. The only ways a thing can fail to exist are through incompatibility with other things or failing to be caused. An uncausable being cannot be incompatible with anything else, and it isn't caused. Therefore, it exists in every world. To exist in every world is to exist necessarily. Therefore, an uncausable being is necessary. Conclusion 6, part 1. This is a favorite of mine. The third argument here is a hobby of mine, actually. Conclusion. Only one being is necessarily existent. Argument 1. Two species in the same genus are unequal in perfection. 2. Nothing can be more perfect than a necessary being. 3. Therefore, there cannot be two necessary beings. Argument 2. If there are two necessary beings, then there are two disconnected universes, for one essential order is sufficient and exclusive to any other. B. But it's only necessary to posit one universe, as we only observe one. Therefore, because there is only one universe, there is only the need for positing one necessary being. And then conclusion 6, part 2. If there was two necessary beings, they would share some positive feature which constituted a genus, and have something which distinguished them. So this is saying that if there was something which existed from itself, if it had necessary existence, there would be an aspect of that being which accounted for this. We'll call the aspect like X. And then there would be an individuating feature, we'll call that Y, and Z. If there was two necessary beings, one would be XY and one would be XZ. So the common feature, or the genus, is X, and the distinguishing features would be Y and Z in my example. Okay. 2. The existence of the separate beings is either accounted for by A, their genus, or B, their differentiating feature. So A, their genus is X, and B, their differentiating feature is either Y or Z. 3. If A, X, or their genus, then the individuating feature has to come after the common nature logically. That means there has to be a logical moment 1 where the being exists or has necessary existence, and then this thing is split into 2 by the differentiating features at the second logical moment. 4. In individuated things, the individuating feature is logically primary. This is to say that you can't take something which is 1 and split it into 2, at least not in the way we're talking about. So in individuated things that have a common nature, that have a genus, the genus comes after the individuating feature. And this means that it can't be A. It can't be the genus which accounts for why there are two different beings here. Okay, so what about B? Is their differentiating feature the reason they exist? Well, if B, then some formality is prior logically to the formality which makes the being necessary. But nothing can be prior to the formality which makes the being have necessary existence. If it was, then it would have to exist before it existed. Therefore, it can't be B. Therefore, not A and B. So there cannot be two necessary beings. Yeah. I hope you learned something.